My name is Carrie May, and I am 35 years old. People always assumed my comic collection was nothing more than an unusual hobby. They saw shelves lined with colorful covers and boxes stacked with old books, and they thought I was clinging to childhood. They couldn't have been more wrong. Those comics were the closest thing I had left to my father. Long before I knew how to explain grief or love, we spoke through those stories. My dad worked HVAC his entire life. His hands were always rough from years of repairing furnaces and air conditioners, but every Wednesday evening he'd come home carrying a paper bag from the neighborhood comic shop. We never had much money. Vacations were rare. Expensive restaurants didn't exist in our world, but every week there was somehow enough for another comic book. Wednesday nights belonged to us. We'd sit together on the living room floor, carefully sliding each issue from its sleeve before reading side by side. We'd argue over which superhero had the best origin story, laugh over ridiculous plot twists, and speculate about what would happen in the next issue. Those memories became the language of our family. When Dad died from a heart attack 4 years ago, I didn't inherit wealth. I inherited his stories. Over 28 years, we'd built a collection that most collectors only dreamed about. Some books were inexpensive readers, but others were genuine treasures. Giant-size X-Men Hasson, a beautifully preserved Hulk Hasson Atone, a nearly flawless Amazing Spider-Man run from the late 200s. Every valuable issue had been professionally graded, photographed, cataloged, and insured. The insurance appraisal placed the collection at just over $47,000. To everyone else, they were comic books. To me, they were memories I could still touch. For the past 2 years, I'd been living with my boyfriend, Brandon Ellis. The apartment lease was entirely in my name because Brandon's credit score made landlords nervous. I paid most of the rent, most of the utilities, and even the additional monthly fee for the spare bedroom. That room served 2 purposes: my home office during the day and the archive that protected my father's legacy. Brandon always pretended he accepted it. He joked that I was running a museum for nerds. Sometimes he'd call the collection paper dolls for grown women. I'd laugh it off because relationships require compromise, and I thought teasing was harmless. Looking back, those jokes weren't harmless. They were warnings. Over the previous month, he'd become obsessed with redesigning our apartment. Every evening, another home renovation show played on television while he talked about creating a cleaner, more mature lifestyle. One night, the spare room was supposed to become a meditation sanctuary. The next night, it was a guest suite for when his judgmental mother visited. A few days later, he insisted it should become a luxury content studio for his online coaching business that barely earned $200 a month. Every conversation ended exactly the same way. The comics have to go. No, I'd answer calmly. That room isn't available. It's my office, my archive, and I'm paying for it. He would sigh dramatically, mutter that I was impossible, then drop the subject. Or at least I believed he had. The following Tuesday, our logistics company suffered a major system outage. Management sent everyone home just after lunch because nothing could be processed until the servers came back online. I unlocked the apartment around 2 o'clock. Immediately, something felt wrong. Normally, Brandon had motivational podcasts or business influencers blasting through the speakers while he edited videos for social media. Today, nothing. The silence felt strangely heavy. I walked toward my office, expecting to grab my laptop and enjoy an unexpected afternoon off. Then I stopped. The office door was standing open. My heart skipped once. Then again. The custom shelving unit my father and I had built together was completely empty. Every long comic box was gone. Every graded display book had disappeared. The framed covers that once decorated the walls had vanished. In the center of the room sat a beige yoga mat. Beside it was a dying fern that looked as uncomfortable in the room as I suddenly felt. For several seconds I couldn't move. It honestly felt like the floor beneath me had disappeared. I stepped inside, hoping somehow I was mistaken. Maybe Brandon had reorganized everything. Maybe he was installing new shelves. Maybe? No. There wasn't a single comic left. I slowly walked into the living room. Brandon was sitting comfortably on the couch, one leg crossed over the other, lazily scrolling through his phone while sipping a glass of white wine. He looked up with a satisfied smile. "You're home early." I stared at him. He pointed proudly toward the hallway. "Looks amazing, doesn't it? The apartment feels so much bigger." My throat felt dry. "Brandon." He smiled wider. "Where are my comics?" He barely glanced away from his phone. He handled it. Every nerve in my body tightened. "What does that mean?" "You've been saying you wanted to be more serious about the future." He shrugged. "You're 35, Carrie. It's time to grow up." I felt cold. "What did you do?" "I listed them." My voice became barely audible. "Listed them where?" "eBay." He sounded proud of himself. "And Facebook Marketplace for the heavier boxes." I couldn't breathe. "You what?" "I priced everything to move fast." He grinned. "People love collectible junk. We can finally put money toward our future." "Our future?" "The wedding." I blinked. "I never agreed to a wedding. You would have eventually." I stepped closer. "Brandon, my collection is insured for more than $47,000. He laughed. "Oh, Carrie. Stop being dramatic." My voice cracked. "Did you sell them?" "They've been selling all day." He held up his phone. "I've already made almost $2,000. $2,000. He had sold nearly $50,000 worth of collectibles. And the last physical connection I had to my father, for less than the price of a used couch, show me." He rolled his eyes. "You are so ungrateful. I spent hours taking pictures." He shoved the phone into my hands. A brand new seller account. One listing after another. There was Hulk Hasson Atone. Buy it now. $500. Sold within seconds. Giant size X-Men. $300. Sold. Entire Spider-Man boxes listed for $100. Boxes containing books collectors spent years searching for. I felt sick. "You stole from me." His expression hardened instantly. "I didn't steal anything." "You took my property. We live together." His voice rose. "That makes it community property." "No, it doesn't. I'm doing this for us." His face turned bright red. "You care more about stupid paper than you care about me." I looked him directly in the eyes. "Those comics belong to my father," he scoffed. "Your father is dead, Carrie." The room became perfectly silent. "He doesn't care anymore." That single sentence burned away everything I had ever felt for him. There was no shouting, no tears, no dramatic argument, only clarity. I walked into the bedroom, opened my suitcase, packed enough clothes for several days, placed my laptop inside, collected my important documents. Behind me, Brandon's confidence began slipping. "Where are you going?" "A hotel." "Seriously?" I zipped the suitcase. "Don't contact me. You're throwing away 2 years over comic books?" I looked at him one final time. "No." My voice was calm enough to frighten even me. "I'm leaving because you stole my father's legacy." And then told me it didn't matter. Without waiting for another excuse, I walked out of the apartment. I sat inside my car for nearly 10 minutes, trying to steady my breathing. Then I started the engine. My destination wasn't a friend's house. It wasn't a hotel. It was the nearest police precinct. By the time I walked through those doors, I wasn't looking to save my relationship anymore. I was preparing to recover everything my boyfriend had stolen. The desk sergeant introduced himself as Officer Kowalski. He looked like the kind of man who had spent decades listening to every excuse imaginable. When I explained that my boyfriend had stolen my comic collection, he sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Couples fight over property every day," he said. "If you live together, these situations usually become civil matters." I expected that answer. Without saying another word, I opened the binder I'd carried with me. My father had taught me to document everything. Inside were the insurance policy, the collectibles rider, the professional appraisal completed 6 months earlier, photographs of every valuable issue, serial numbers for every graded slab, purchase receipts collected over the years. and a complete inventory of the collection. The insured value is $47,450, I said quietly. Everything belonged to me. My boyfriend removed it while I was at work and has already started selling it online without my permission. Officer Kowalski slowly flipped through the pages. His expression changed. He looked at the appraisal again, then at me. This isn't a box of old magazines. No, this is felony theft. For the first time that day, someone understood. He took my statement carefully, copied the inventory, photographed the online listings, and asked for the seller account information Brandon had created. Before I left, he handed me a case number. "We'll move quickly," he said. "The sooner we act, the better chance we have of recovering everything." I thanked him and drove to an extended stay hotel. Sleep wasn't even a possibility. Instead, I opened my laptop and began working. Every minute mattered. First, I contacted eBay's Trust and Safety Department. I uploaded the police report, the insurance documentation, the appraisal, and proof that every listed comic belonged to me. Then I began messaging buyers one by one. Some listings still allowed direct contact. Others required finding usernames through completed sales. Every message was nearly identical. "Hello. I am the legal owner of the comic you recently purchased from the seller. The item was stolen from my residence earlier today. A police report has been filed. eBay has been notified. Please do not open the package if it arrives. Investigators may contact you regarding the recovery of stolen property. Some of it was strategic wording, some of it was a bluff. But I needed those buyers to hesitate." Around 11 that night, my phone exploded with incoming calls. "Brandon. Again. Again. Again." I ignored everyone. Then came the text messages. "Carrie, the police are here. What did you do? Answer me." A minute later, another one arrived. "You're humiliating me. Tell them this is a misunderstanding." I switched my phone off. For the first time all day, I slept. 3 days later, the situation had changed dramatically. Brandon, in his rush to get paid, had only shipped about 10 of the highest value comics. The remaining long boxes were still stacked inside the trunk and back seat of his Kia, waiting for another trip to the post office. When officers arrived that first night with the appraisal and theft report, they treated the case exactly as it deserved. According to my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Collins, who somehow always knew everything happening in the building, Brandon completely lost control. He screamed. He argued. He refused to let officers inspect his vehicle. That refusal only made them more suspicious. Combined with the documentation I'd provided, they had enough legal justification to search. They opened the trunk. Inside sat nearly my entire collection. The officers immediately seized every box as evidence. Later that afternoon, I received another phone call. "Miss May?" "Yes, this is Detective Miller." My pulse quickened. "We've recovered most of your property." I closed my eyes. Relief hit so suddenly my knees nearly gave out. "And Brandon?" There was a short pause. "He has been arrested for felony grand larceny and trafficking stolen property. I didn't celebrate. I simply thanked him." Some victories arrived quietly. The following morning, I hired movers. With a police escort present, I returned to the apartment only long enough to collect my clothes, furniture, electronics, and personal documents. I barely looked at Brandon's belongings. The only things I intentionally left behind were the beige yoga mat and the dying fern. The landlord met me outside afterward. He'd already heard about the arrest. Once he reviewed the police report, he agreed to release me from the lease immediately without any penalties. Brandon wasn't listed on the lease at all. Instead, the landlord informed me he would begin eviction proceedings because the apartment prohibited criminal activity on the property. Actions have consequences, sometimes more than one. Unfortunately, Brandon's family still believed I was the problem. The first phone call came from his father. "Carrie, this is Michael." I recognized his voice immediately. "We need to end this nonsense." "Nonsense? My son made a mistake. He committed a felony. He didn't know those comics were worth that much. He knew they weren't his." Silence. Then came the predictable argument. You're ruining his life. No, I answered calmly. He ruined it the moment he sold something that belonged to me. Michael sighed heavily. We're willing to write you a check. For how much? $2,000. I almost laughed. My collection was worth over $47,000. It's just to make things right. It won't. Carrie, my father collected those books with me. We're talking about comic books. We're talking about my father. His voice hardened. You're being vindictive. I remembered Brandon standing in our living room. Your father is dead. He doesn't care anymore. That memory erased every remaining ounce of sympathy. The district attorney is handling the case now, I replied. I can't drop charges that no longer belong to me. Then, I ended the call. Because our state allowed single-party consent recordings, I immediately forwarded the recording to Detective Miller. Every conversation mattered now. Meanwhile, eBay permanently suspended Brandon's seller account for fraud. Most buyers cooperated once investigators contacted them. One collector who had purchased the Hulk Hassonedane initially refused to return it. He insisted he had found an incredible bargain and legally owned it. That attitude disappeared the moment Detective Miller explained exactly what receiving stolen property across state lines could mean. The comic arrived back at the evidence locker 2 days later. Not every recovery ended happily. When Detective Miller invited me to identify the recovered collection, my excitement vanished almost immediately. The boxes hadn't been packed carefully. They'd been thrown into Brandon's trunk like old camping equipment. Several raw comics were bent. Corners were crushed. Plastic sleeves had split. Then, I found the comic that broke me. Dad's copy of Secret Wars Hashite, the issue he'd bought after I'd earned straight A's in 5th grade. There was a brown coffee ring across the front cover. Brandon had used the box as a table while loading his car. I stood there staring at that stain. My vision blurred. Tears rolled silently down my face. Not because it was the most valuable comic. Because it wasn't replaceable. Detective Miller quietly handed me a tissue. We'll include the damage in the restitution request. I nodded. I don't want the money. He looked at me. I want him to understand. My voice trembled. That people aren't allowed to erase someone else's memories simply because they don't value them. Detective Miller nodded slowly. I think he's beginning to understand. 4 months later, everything finally came to an end. Brandon accepted a plea deal instead of taking the case to trial. The evidence was overwhelming: his own text messages, the online listings, the appraisal, and his admission that he'd waited until I was at work before selling the collection. His attorney knew there was no realistic defense left. The judge sentenced him to 3 years of probation, 400 hours of community service, mandatory anger management counseling, and restitution for the damaged and unrecovered comics, along with my moving and legal expenses. Most importantly, he now had a felony conviction on his record. Before ending the hearing, the judge looked directly at him. You don't get to decide what another person's memories are worth. Actions have consequences. Brandon lowered his head and said nothing. Over the next few months, the police released the recovered comics back to me. About 90% of the collection had been saved. A few books were permanently lost, and several others, including my father's copy of Secret Wars Hashite, had been damaged. The coffee stain on its cover could never be removed. My insurance company covered the missing books and then filed its own lawsuit against Brandon to recover the payout. Life slowly became peaceful again. I bought a small house with a second bedroom that became my personal library. Every comic returned to carefully built shelves, and for the first time in months, the room felt like home again. Not long afterward, I met a kind man named Daniel. On our 3rd date, I told him about my comic collection, expecting another sarcastic remark. Instead, he smiled. That must be a lot of incredible memories with your dad. It was the simplest response anyone could have given. And somehow, it was exactly what I needed to hear. The day after sentencing, Brandon sent one final text. You chose paper over a person. I looked at the shelves surrounding me before quietly deleting the message. I hadn't chosen paper over a person. I had chosen respect over betrayal. I had chosen my father's legacy over someone else's selfishness. Then I picked up one of Dad's old comics, settled into my favorite chair, and started reading.